Welcome to the Unquendor Guitars workshop for another part in a series where I build a new guitar. In this video I'm going to prepare the fretboard. I'm going to thickness it using hand planes and a little trick on my oscillating spindle sander. So relax and watch me work on this fretboard. In my experience, planing a fretboard down using hand planes can be quite tricky. Usually you get all kinds of tear outs and yeah, it can be quite tricky to get a perfect smooth result, at least in my experience. So what I'll do is I'll start by planing down the fretboard to a certain thickness and then use a trick on my oscillating spindle sander to sand it down to the correct thickness, because yeah, I don't have an official thickness sander. In order to plane the fretboard down, you need to clamp it to the bench, and I made this block that's planed exactly level and nice and flat. And I can use some dock benches to clamp it to my bench, and again use the masking tape and super glue trick to glue the fretboard to this block, and then I have a steady surface to start planing. Alright, and I'll gently use a rather sharp hand plane. Yeah, I'm taking off just the tiniest amount, just little shavings at a time, just to prevent any big tear outs in my fretboard. So this is going to take a while. Yeah, I think I'm going to put this into a time lapse. I used a couple of my hand planes to get this fretboard down to about 8mm thickness. Now I'm going to show you the trick on my spindle sander to get it to the final thickness and get it real smooth and real straight. If you have a small workshop like I do, you probably don't have the space to fit in a drum sander or a thickness sander. So I came up with a little trick using my oscillating spindle sander and the fence from my router table to create basically a very small thickness sander. And this is what I use to sand down my fretboards to the final thickness. So I just used the fence of my router table, clamped it to the bed of the spindle sander, and I have to make sure I can barely fit my fretboard in between the sanding drum and the fence, and I have to make a lot of passes to get my fretboard to the desired thickness. If you want to do this yourself, make sure to only take off the smallest amount on each pass. If you have to push real hard to get your fretboard through the sander, you're probably taking off too much, and you have to back off the fence a little so you can make nice and easy passes through your sander. Always feed in your fretboard against the rotating direction of the spindle sander, otherwise it will grab it and it will shoot your fretboard through the workshop, and that's never a good idea. So be sure to make small passes and feed against the direction of your spindle sander. I'm going to turn on the dust extraction because it's going to get very dusty. Yeah, and let's sand down this fretboard. There are a couple of things you have to keep in mind when you want to use your improvised thickness sander. Keep your fretboard or the material you're trying to thickness this way in contact with your fence at all time. Of course, your fence has to be square to the bed of your spindle sander, and keep a nice and even feed rate. If you stop halfway through, you end up with dimples from your sanding drum, and especially when you're close to your final thickness, and you don't want to end up with a fretboard with all kinds of sanding marks and dimples in it. So keep the feed rate as steady as possible. Yeah, I'm now at 7 millimeters. I've got a nice and flat level fretboard. Now with the fretboard down to the desired thickness, I have to decide on the grain pattern and how I want it to show up on the neck. And for this, I think the lighter part of the fretboard with less pronounced grain and less pronounced coloring to be for the first frets, and then the darker part to be at the bottom of the fretboard to give a nice contrast with the body. And with that decision made, it's time to get out the fret slotting jig and start cutting the fret slots. I use a very familiar design for a fret slotting jig. This is actually not the familiar American brand, but this is Dutch made. And it comes with these templates, and these templates have little notches for the correct spacing of the frets, and it's for 2 scale lengths. This is for a 25.5 inch scale length and a 25 inch scale. I'm going to use 25.5 inch for my scales. And you can just stick the fretboard to the template, and there's a little pin inside of the jig that grabs on to one of these notches, and you can just cut one fret slot, move it up, move the template over a notch, cut the second one, the third one, until you have 24 fret slots cut, and you can also use it to cut your fretboard to length. I've added an extra notch, the 25th fret slot, and I can use it to cut the entire fretboard to length, and I'm sure that all my cuts are parallel. So yeah, let's stick this to the template using the masking tape and super glue trick and start cutting in the fret slots. Make sure the orientation is the way you want it. I'm going to adjust the cutting depth on this fret slotting jig to get a depth of around about 4 millimeters. My fret tang needs a slot depth of 1.5 millimeters, and I know I'm going to lose approximately 1.5 to 2 millimeters on the size of my fretboard when sanding in the 12-inch radius. So I'm going to need a slightly deeper cut to begin with. So everything should be set now to start cutting the fret slots. And here we have our cut fret slots, all nice in a consistent depth. Now I have to cut off the 2 ends, and I have my fretboard ready for glue up. I went ahead and I clamped a square parallel to the line we drawn earlier where the nut is going to be, and I've marked a line perpendicular to the center line where the end of the fretboard is going to be, so I can easily align my fretboard to the center line of the neck. With the fretboard temporarily clamped into place, I'm going to drill 2 guide packs, and I'm going to use a toothpick. so I can reposition it, so I can reposition the fretboard easy when I've applied the glue. So let me get my drill. Very small drill bit. Let's mark the position for these guiding pins. I want to make sure I'm measuring out where the guide pin is going to be, and I want to make sure I don't hit the truss rod by accident. Right, so let's drill a small hole, and I'm going to drill the hole for the guide pin in one of the fret slots, of course, so I won't see it when the guitar is finished. Now with these guide pins in place, I can remove the fretboard and start applying the glue. I always like to mask the twist rod cavity so it doesn't get flooded with glue when I start applying it. So let's get some masking tape. So just a very small strip. Let's start applying the glue. More than enough glue. I like to use this foam padding and a clamping coil. Nice and straight piece of mahogany. And now I can clamp up the fretboard. And just a couple of clamps is more than enough to clamp down your fretboard. It doesn't take that much force at all. We've got a nice bit of squeeze out, and that means our fretboard is nice and level. Remove the excess glue right away. And now there's nothing else to do but wait. It's the next day. The glue had plenty of time to cure, so it's time to remove the clamp and cut off the excess from the side of the fretboard and route it flush with the side of the neck blank. These two pieces of tape at the start and the end of the fretboard, I put them there to prevent any squeeze out, to ruin the wood, and to keep a nice and clean flat surface. Yeah, let's go to the bandsaw. So yeah, here we have it. Fretboard is on the neck blank, 24 fret slots, nicely cut. Yeah, it's starting to look like a guitar neck now. And this is where I'm going to leave it for this week's episode. In the next episode, next week's video, I will be rough cutting out the rest of the neck and start shaping the neck somewhat. And I have to think about what I want to do for the fret position markers and maybe a nice inlay on the 12th fret. I'm not sure if I'm going to use my usual tulip design or maybe something completely different. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please leave a like, subscribe to my channel if you already haven't, and I hope to see you in the next video. But until then, have a nice week.